Chapter 3, Part 2, India and Southeast Asia. Angkor Wat, Cambodia. The temples of Angkor were built by the Khmer civilization between 802 and 1220 AD. From Angkor, the Khmer kings ruled over a vast domain that reached from Vietnam to China to the Bay of Bengal. There are more than 100 stone temples in all. These include religious, social, and administrative buildings. Some of the buildings, palaces, public buildings, other houses, were built of wood and have long since decayed and disappeared. Angkor Wat encompasses an area of about 500 acres. It is one of the largest religious monuments ever constructed. The name Angkor Wat means temple city. Originally, it was built as a Hindu temple dedicated to the god Vishnu. It was later converted into a Buddhist temple in the 14th century. Statues of Buddha were then added. The central tower is 213 feet tall and surrounded by 4 smaller towers and a series of enclosure walls. This is meant to recreate the image of Mount Meru, a legendary place in Hindu mythology that is said to lie beyond the Himalayas and to be home of the gods. Angkor Wat is surrounded by a 650-foot wide moat that encompasses a perimeter of more than 3 miles. This moat is 13 feet deep. This would have helped stabilize the temple's foundation, preventing groundwater from rising too high or falling too low. The main entrance was in the west, a direction associated with Vishnu, across a stone causeway with guardian lions marking the way. To the east was a second, more modest entrance. At the heart of the temple was the central tower. You could enter it by a steep staircase. At the very top was a statue of Vishnu. This way, Vishnu and the king ruled over the Khmer people. Angkor Wat was begun by Suravaram II. The walls and moats surrounding the central tower represents chains of mountains and the cosmic ocean. Unfortunately, Angkor Wat was sacked by the Thais in 1431 and was abandoned just the year later in 1432. Angkor was then forgotten for centuries. Wandering Buddhist monks passing through the dense jungles occasionally came across these ruins. Unfortunately, the nature of the temples had been forgotten, so they invented some mysterious fables surrounding these mysterious ruins they kept seeing. These legends became more and more outlandish about this mystic city of the gods. And later, Europeans started hearing these stories and wanted to find this city of the gods. French explorer Henry Mouhot brought Angkor to the world's attention in 1860. The French people were enchanted with this mysterious city, and in 1908 funded an extensive restoration project. The restoration of Angkor Wat continues to this day. The temples were also precisely aligned with star formations. So here's some close-ups of these temples. This is the main temple. You can see 3 out of the 4 smaller towers here. And this is the central large tower. You can see the people down here at the very bottom right. You can see how tiny they are in reflection of this large temple. Here's an aerial shot to give you an idea of the vastness of Angkor Wat. Bayon Temple. It is a Khmer temple at Angkor in Cambodia, built in the 12th or early 13th century as the state temple of the Mahayana Buddhist king Jayavarman VII. This stands at the center of the capital, Angkor Thom. Following Jayavarman's death, it was modified and augmented by later Hindu and Buddhist kings in accordance with their own religious preferences. The most distinctive feature of this temple are the numerous serene and smiling stone faces on the towers. The temple has a series of bas-reliefs which represent a combination of mythological, historical, and other commonplace scenes. Here's a close-up of those faces. Let's talk about Jainism. Jainism is an ancient religion from India that teaches that the way to liberation and bliss is to live lives of harmlessness and renunciation. The essence of Jainism is concern for the welfare of every being in the universe. A soul that has achieved the ultimate state of supreme being is called a Jina. Jains believe that animals and plants, as well as human beings, contain living souls. Each of these souls is considered of equal value and should be treated with respect and compassion. Jains are strict vegetarians and live in a way that minimizes their use of the world's resources. They believe in reincarnation and seek to attain ultimate liberation, which means escaping the continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, so that the immortal souls live forever in a state of bliss. There are no gods or spiritual beings that help people in Jainism. The three guiding principles of Jainism, the three jewels, are right belief, right knowledge, and right conduct. The supreme principle of Jain living is non-violence, or ahimsa. There are 5 great vows, or Mahavratas. These are non-attachment to possessions, not lying, not stealing, sexual constraint, with celibacy being the ideal, and non-violence. The teachings of Mahavira are called agamas. Mahavira is the man who is considered to give Jainism its present-day form. While Jainism has no priests, it does have monks and nuns who lead strict and ascetic lives. This is the ascetic Gamata. This is in India. This is a 60-foot tall statue representing the famous ascetic Gamata, the second son of Rishabha. He was known for meditating for years without stopping. So that's why we have these vines and branches growing all around his body, symbolizing the fact that he has been stationary and meditating, and so nature is growing all around him. The Vital Vasahi Temple. This temple is made up of 55 domes. Each is different and unique. They're all elaborately decorated as this one is, and they're meant to resemble the heavens. The carvings are meant to replicate a type of paper art. They're very thin and extremely delicate. This is the earliest and most important of the temples dedicated to the first Jaina Tirthankara, Adinath. It stands in an open courtyard defined by 58 cells. These contain small icons duplicating the saint's image in the main shrine. The entire temple is carved out of white marble. The designs are lotus buds, petals, flowers, and other scenes from Jain mythology. It is said that the sculptors were paid according to the weight of the dust they collected, which encouraged them to produce ever more intricate carvings. And now you can see the outside of this intricately designed temple. The temple is dedicated to Lord Rishabha. There's detail. You can see the intricate carvings. Now we're in the Islamic section. This is Abul Fazl presenting the first book of the Akbarnama to Akbar from the second Akbarnama. This is created under the reign of Akbar. He was really in love with these Persian traditions and artists and really encouraged them. You'll notice we are starting to have these semi-Western portraits and gestures starting to integrate into this art form. They're blending elements from Indian, Persian, and Western traditions while all developing a unique style of their own. There's also these brilliant, vibrant hues, these beautiful colors in these works. You'll notice deep reds and yellows and blues. The scale of the figures in relation to the picture plane is also much larger than in the traditional Persian style. So there's an emphasis on the human form in this Indian style. We see some of the Western tradition coming out in this sense of depth and distance in these pieces. In a lot of Islamic tradition, we see a very flattened style. In this, we see a lot more depth that we see in the Western tradition. The corresponding text to this image is a treatise on depicting the human form. We see very individualized faces. These aren't stylized. We also have a single point perspective in this. So this was created under the reign of Akbar, or Akbar the Great. So who is he? Akbar was the third emperor of this new dynasty, the Mughals, a Muslim empire established in India in the early 16th century by Babur, a descendant of Genghis Khan. Upon Babur's death in 1530, the new empire was left to his 22-year-old son Humayun, who quickly lost control of the majority of his domain as sultans fought to regain their land. In 1543, Humayun was forced to flee India and leave his young son Akbar in the care of his family at Kandahar. The Safavid Shah Tahmasp I welcomed Humayun to his court in Persia, present-day Iran, not as a fugitive but as an equal, granting him protection and military support. Immersed for 2 years in the refinement and splendor of the arts and culture there, Humayun was exposed to the opulence and sophistication unlike anything he had ever seen in his father's military encampments. As a result of his stay in Iran, the original language of the Mughals was abandoned in favor of Persian. Monumental architectural forms were adopted and refined, and an imperial workshop of painters in the Persian miniature style was founded. Reunited with his son in 1545, Humayun eventually regained control of India before dying suddenly in 1556, when Akbar inherited the Mughal territories at 13 years old. He was surrounded by rivals on all sides. There was no stable government, not an empire that he could call. In fact, it was a pretty bleak future. However, within less than 50 years, Akbar had created a stable, peaceful empire. He brought together diverse peoples and cultures in India to form an unprecedented cooperative empire. He was instrumental in the formation of this empire that lasted over 200 years. Akbar was a champion of literature, architecture, music, and painting. Although he himself was illiterate, at the time of his death in 1605, the Imperial Library contained over 24,000 volumes, and there was innumerable numbers of painters in the imperial workshop. He encouraged tolerance in his policies. Akbar's court included artists from all regions of India, creating a melting pot of techniques and styles. The Mughal painting under Akbar the Great is known for its unique blend of indigenous Indian, Persian, and Western traditions. Jahangir preferring a Sufi to kings. So this is Jahangir seated on a cushion. You will see that there's that halo or nimbus behind him like we saw in the early Buddhas. The black-bearded man is an Ottoman ruler that Timur, his ancestor, had conquered 200 years earlier. Below him is James I of England. Here's James I right here. Kind of sticks out once you start looking at him. And then below him is a Hindu man that is holding a self-portrait. There is thought that this is actually a portrait of the artist. Unfortunately, Jahangir was actually addicted to opium-laced wine, so he actually died 3 years after this miniature was completed. When Akbar the Great, who we previously spoke about, had no living heir at the age of 28, he consulted with a Sufi, an Islamic mystic, named Sheikh Salim, who assured him a son would come. Soon after, a male child was born he named Salim. Prince Salim decided to give himself the honorific title of Nur-ud-Din, Light of Faith, and the name Jahangir, Caesar of the World, upon his ascent to the throne in 1605. So again, we have Jahangir seated there with the halo or nimbus behind him. You will notice that he is the largest of the figures painted. He is the most important in the piece. So the person that he's actually interacting with is a Sufi named Sufi Sheikh, who accepts a book being given to him with a smile on his face. By engaging directly with the Sheikh, Jahangir is making a statement about his political and spiritual leanings. In those cartouches, here at the top here, and the bottom here, the words there actually talk about the fact that the emperor favors visitation with a holy man over an audience with kings. But you will notice that Jahangir still has all the trappings of wealth. He has wrist bracelets with gems, finger rings, and the Sufi has bare hands and no jewels on him. Also notice that the Sufi accepts the gift, but not directly in his hands, but actually in his shawl, therefore avoiding physical contact with the king, which was a cultural taboo. All right, so again, the guy underneath him with the black beard is an Ottoman sultan. We don't know exactly which one, but he's dressed in gold, embroidered green clothing and a turban in a style that is very distinctive. The third figure there, again, is King James I of England, which you might think is an odd addition. We notice that he has very European style of clothing, the plumed hat with the feathers in it. We've got a pink cloak, a fitted shirt with a lace ruffle, elaborate jewelry. He's also looking directly at us, which is interesting. He's not actually interacting with Jahangir. This image is actually based on an image by John de Creets, which was believed to have been given to Jahangir by Sir Thomas Roe, the first English ambassador to the Mughal court. You will also notice that one of the king's hands is close to, but not touching, the hilt of his weapon. Typically at this time, this is a very traditional way of portraying, especially kings, is holding onto their weapon, their sword or whatever, having that hand on it, showing their power and military might. In this case, his hand is actually hovering near but not on, something that would have been done to please the emperor. And then let's talk about this last guy, the guy in the red hat and the gold garment. The yellow jama or robe indicates that he is Hindu. He is in service at the Mughal court. We think that this is probably pt2, the artist who created this miniature. Partly we think this because he himself is holding a red bordered miniature painting. So we have, again, the fourth man is holding a miniature painting, so it would make sense that the artist would show himself with his art. In that miniature, he is standing alongside two horses and an elephant, which may have been imperial gifts. He also shows himself bowing in the direction of his emperor in humble gratitude. pt2 puts his signature on the stool over which the emperor's feet would have to step in order to take his seat. So this stool here is there at the bottom that the signature is. Now, there's a few more things let's point out on this wonderful miniature painting. So beneath the seat are those two crouching angels here and here. There's also some writing in Persian. This is translated, "O Shah, may the span of your life be 1,000 years." This is there at the base of that hourglass. That makes up the base of his throne there. We also have those two little putti at the very top. There's not much about those, so we're not quite sure why those were included, maybe just as an homage to European painting at the time. The putti on the left holds a bow with broken string and a bent arrow, while the one on the right covers his face with his hands. So again, there's lots of kind of interpretations, but we're not positive on what they might mean. This miniature was part of a maraca or album, which would typically have an alternating folio containing text and painting. Here's some details so you can see some of these things we've been talking about. All right, so here is that book that we saw that the king was giving the Sufi, and we can see that the Sufi is again taking it in his cloak, not with his hands. And we can also see the elaborate jewels that the king is wearing. There is the Ottoman ruler in the black beard, and there is, of course, the English king down here, James. So we can see there is the hilt of his sword, and again his hand is slightly off. Otherwise, this is a pretty good replication of this image that was gifted to the king by the ambassador. So that small adjustment for the emperor. And then we've got the artist showing a self-portrait, of course, again, in the golden robes. And there is his miniature, and there we can see the elephant there in the miniature that he's holding. It's just amazing. Here are the two little angels there at the bottom, and there's the Persian that we talked about. So again, just a fascinating amount of detail in this wonderful small piece. And of course, we have to talk about the Taj Mahal. This is from the Shah Jahan period. This is a royal tomb in Agra, completed in 1650 by Shah Jahan in memory of his deceased wife, Mumtaz Mahal. It is created out of white marble, inlaid with colored, semi-precious stones in the form of flowers, vines, and cursive inscriptions. There is a quadpartite formal garden with 4 axial pools. So, 4-part garden with a pool on each side. This is very much in the Persian style. This is meant to evoke the metaphor of the gardens of paradise. These are promised to devout believers in the Quran. So there are these religious connotations as well as secular. The whole idea is to recreate an earthly version of paradise. So in 1631, in the 4th year of his reign, Shah Jahan sent out for Burhanpur with his armies to subdue a rebellion. Even though his wife Mumtaz Mahal was in the 9th month of a pregnancy, she accompanied him as she had done many times before. In the evening in April in 1631, the queen gave birth to their 14th child, but soon suffered complications and took a turn for the worse. According to legend, with her dying breath, she secured a promise from her husband, on the strength of their love, to build for her a mausoleum more beautiful than any the world had ever seen before. 6 months after the death of his wife, he laid the foundation for her memorial. This was across the Jamuna River near his palace in Agra. In the center of the mausoleum lie the remains of Mumtaz Mahal. But just as Shah Jahan had conspired against his brothers for this empire, so did his own son plot against him. In 1658, his son Aurangzeb declared himself emperor and imprisoned his father in a tower of the Red Fort in Agra. So this white marble mausoleum is flanked on either side by identical buildings in red sandstone. One of these, we know, was served as a mosque. The other, we're not quite sure what the original function is. So this mausoleum, the Taj Mahal, we know just has a large bulbous dome, and we have 4 minarets surrounding. The 4 minarets that you see here are ornamental, not functional. They do not have a muezzin who goes up to do the call of prayer like you would have in a mosque. The interior floor plan of the Taj alludes to the 8 levels of paradise. So there are 8 halls and side rooms connected to a main space in this cross-axial plan. This is a favorite design for Islamic architecture from this time period. The main chamber holds Mumtaz Mahal's intricately decorated marble cenotaph, which is an empty tomb or monument on a raised platform. The emperor's was laid down beside hers after he died 3 decades later. The coffins bearing their actual remains lie in spaces directly beneath these cenotaphs. The Quranic verses inscribed into the walls of the building and designs inlaid with semi-precious stones like coral, onyx, cornelian, amethyst, lapis lazuli add to this splendor of the intricately designed building. Many of the Mughal era buildings tended to use red stone for exteriors, not white marble. White marble was reserved for inner spaces or for the tombs of holy men. The red represented the color of the warrior class. White typically was for the priestly class. Here's some details so you can actually see some of those intricately designed flowers and vines inlaid with semi-precious stones right there. So in these images, again, you can see the beautiful designs in the interior. You can also see some of the gardens and how the gardens represent part of the plan of the Taj Mahal. All right, and so in this image, you can actually see those 2 red buildings on either side that we typically don't pay much attention to. We typically just pay attention to the white marble. And here again, those intricately carved designs with those semi-precious stones. And there are those 2 cenotaphs that I just talked about for Mumtaz Mahal and her husband. So their actual bodies, their sarcophaguses will actually be underneath here. Unfortunately, the Taj Mahal is actually at risk. Air pollution is actually starting to discolor the exterior. It is no longer as white as it used to be. The acid rain actually is deteriorating the marble. There's actually been a ban on auto traffic near the Taj Mahal to try to lessen the effects. They've also proposed a cap in tourists visiting the site to help this. Another risk to the Taj Mahal is the drying up of the Yamuna River that you see in the top image. The river had been partially dammed upstream from the Taj Mahal in order to augment municipal water supplies. Unfortunately, the changes in the soil due to the lower water table are actually threatening the structural integrity of the monument. Scholars have found cracks in the marble platform, sinking of the structure, and tipping of the minarets. Radha and Krishna in the grove. We are now in another Hindu section here. Krishna is an incarnation of Vishnu. Krishna is the hero of the Mahabharata, an epic poem. He delivered his famous message known as the Bhagavad Gita, and is typically shown with a peacock crown. Radha is a goddess. Radha in Hinduism is a gopi or milkmaid who becomes the beloved of the god Krishna during the period of life when he lived among the gopas or cowherds. Radha was the wife of another gopa, but was the dearest of Krishna's consorts and his constant companion. Radha is sometimes interpreted as symbolizing the human soul, and the male, Krishna, is symbolizing the god.